it seems the Concord saga is ending a bit sooner than I think most of us expected. Sony pulled the game from store shelves, delisted everywhere very, very soon after launch. Absolutely disastrous launch. We talked about that endlessly. They said they needed to reconsider their options, and the most likely outcome seemed to be that they would launch the game again in a free-to-play state, simply because you put all that work into something, you charge too much money for it. That's one of the reasons people didn't buy it, and so, like, okay, you try putting it out there for free. The thing is, though, we could tell that even that probably wouldn't bring them any amount of success. It's possible that if they could get anyone, even a small audience playing the game, maybe it would help recoup their costs a little bit. It might be worth it just for that, just so that you could say this product made any amount of money. But whenever you're a company and you have a product that gets off to a rough start and you can tell it's not going to be successful, you have a choice to make. Do you keep working at trying to support this thing that you've already put so many resources into, or do you just cut your losses and go? Because, you know, like, you don't want to waste good work. You don't want to miss out on an opportunity to make some money, to make something out of this, but you can't get caught up in the thinking that because you spent so much money on it, therefore you need to keep supporting it because you need to make back that money. That's the sunk cost fallacy. You can't think quite like that. And the thing about these big companies is, what do they love to do? What is their favorite piece of administrative equipment that they like to use to run their corporate businesses? The piece of equipment that they love most is the guillotine. They love it, especially in recent years. They have shown they will not hesitate to pull out that guillotine. They're almost eager to do it, it feels sometimes. And I suppose in light of just how disastrous the launch of Concord was, I mean, unprecedented. I think we can firmly say a AAA flop on this level is unprecedented. I don't know if there has ever been a game. We don't know exactly how much it cost, but it clearly cost a lot of money and time, huge opportunity cost. Sony bought an entire studio, basically, because they were working on this game and they helped them finish it, and then for it to come out and close immediately, no one played it. I guess because of how unprecedented it was, they were like, all right, we already have the most unprecedented failure in AAA game industry history. We might as well just accept it. Because accept it, they have. Herman Hulst, one of the CEOs at Sony, just put out a statement. You may recognize Herman Hulst as one of the people who allegedly was all in on Concord. Thought it would be the next Star Wars. Allegedly, this all came from him. This was his baby. So I do think it's a little bit funny to see this coming from him. But he, posted a blog on the Sony website, giving a bunch of bad news, just giving a bunch of corporate bad news. And among this bad news, he had the following to say: regarding Firewalk, that's the studio that made Concord, as announced in early September, certain aspects of Concord were exceptional, but others did not land with enough players, and as a result, we took the game offline. We have spent considerable time these past few months exploring all our options. After much thought, we have determined the best path forward is to permanently sunset the game and close the studio. I want to thank all of Firewalk for their craftsmanship, creative spirit, and dedication. Yeah, I'm sure you do. The PvP first-person shooter genre is a competitive space that's continuously evolving. Took you that long to realize it, and unfortunately, we did not hit our targets with this title. We will take the lessons learned from Concord and continue to advance our live service capabilities to deliver future growth in this area. There's so much to talk about here. Are you gonna, what are the lessons learned? That's what I want. I would love to have a conversation with this guy. What are the lessons learned? That's important. That's extremely, extremely important that you actually learned lessons from this. Because I only see one lesson. I only see one. Don't just chase trends. Don't just try to create this amalgam product that tries to please everyone but ends up pleasing nobody. Like, just don't do that. And instead focus on doing what made your company famous, which is just making good games, making good single-player games, making games with a lot of creative drive behind them, instead of just shamelessly aping what the competition is doing. Is that the lesson that you learned? I don't know, but let's move on. So yeah, they're just closing it. It's gone. It's done. Were all of those people who tried to get physical copies of Concord, were they right? Is that a thing? I mean, I don't know. It's literally just it's a piece of plastic at this point. It's just a collector's item because it's gone. It's not coming back free to play. To them, it was better to just shut the whole thing down. And yeah, really, I guess I can't blame them, because even launching free to play, even that is difficult and expensive, and it would require keeping the team around, and obviously they didn't want to do that, but we'll talk about that in a minute. Yeah, it seems it just wasn't worth it. They would have made back some money, maybe, but like, would they have? It's really expensive to run an online game, maintain all the servers and all the moderation and everything. I guess it does make sense. Maybe we should have seen it coming. Clearly, there is no market for this game. There is none. There is essentially zero market for this game, essentially zero interest from the public, and especially after its reputation. Now we only see it as this gigantic failure. That is its legacy. Anything branded with Concord on it, all we see is one of the most massive, perhaps the most massive failure in video game history. You know, maybe E.T. You know, you got a couple famous ones. E.T. was pretty big. I guess they're not throwing copies of Concord into New Mexico landfill, but like it's big. It is really big. And on that note, I mean, it goes without saying, but the Concord episode of that Amazon show still hasn't aired. I think it's coming in December. By the time that comes out, not only will the game have been taken offline, but now Concord as a brand is essentially dead. I mean, technically, they could use it later. I have heard that they actually did do way more work than you would expect. I mean, I know people. I've got a friend who insists, no, if you look at the lore, they actually put a lot of passion into it. Like, I have no doubt. So like, it's technically possible they could use this IP in some way down the line. But again, I don't see why they would, because yeah, that word Concord, like it's crazy. It's the shortest life of a video game IP ever. It was a flash in the pan of the highest degree, the flashiest flash that has ever graced a pan. It was a drop on a burning hot skillet. Done. It's over. So yeah, not incredibly surprising considering how poorly things have gone. But the next part to talk about, which actually I suppose is also not surprising, but it feels a lot. It feels stupider. It feels stupider. Shutting down Firewalk. This Sony, they spent so much money on that studio. And when they were buying the studio, they weren't just buying the studio, they were also buying Concord. And again, we ultimately don't know how much money they spent. There's the $400 million figure going around. It was like 200 buying the studio, then 200 finishing it. We still don't know if that's true or not. But we do know that they must have spent a lot of money and just like time. Again, opportunity cost. Just you engage in this thing, and that means that you are not engaging in a different thing that you could with that money. So like, they put so much into buying Firewalk, and everyone can see that Concord is like, sure, it's this really bland box-ticking hero shooter mess, like, sure, but like, it's still a competent product. It still looks plenty polished. The gameplay is probably perfectly fine. This company clearly is capable of producing a good-looking game. And you spent so much money to acquire them. So it is so frustrating. I mean, it's the EA principle. You buy a company, and instead of letting that company work on, just something good. I mean, I guess in the case of EA, it's letting them work on whatever they want. In this case, Firewalk themselves were, Concord was still their baby, and Sony took it on. It's not just Sony forcing them to do something, but there's no doubt that, they were working on the wrong project, even though they were talented developers. Now, okay, I'm being a little presumptive. I am assuming things. I suppose it is technically possible that, maybe they turned out a good product, but maybe, a polished product, a competent product. Maybe they ultimately took too long to do it. Maybe the pipeline was bad. Maybe ultimately they're not a good studio. Maybe that's why it costs so much money. Maybe for the project that made it to store shelves, maybe it shouldn't have cost that much money, and that is a good reason to shut the studio down. Okay, maybe, but if you set that idea aside for a moment and you just see this is a bunch of people who seem to be good at making games, and all they need is the right game to make, a game that was not invented by a dude in a suit at the top of a skyscraper thinking, what do human gamers like to play? So, to just shut the studio down, I mean, gosh, didn't studios used to get a few more chances than this? Is this really just a newer thing? One failure and you're done? Is that, that's just the new reality of the game industry? Even if it's us who made you make that game, even if we decided that you should make that game and then it fails and when you shut you down, it just it doesn't make any sense, because now you have this studio, all of these people who are just ready and willing to work on the next thing. Just give them a good thing to work on. All of that money, all of that time, all of that investment, getting them into your company. They are there. They're there. They're ready. So to just throw it all away. And why? Why are they throwing it all away? Well, Concord not doing well means they did not meet their expectations. The investors did not get as much money as they wanted. They expected to make money from this thing. So now you can't make less money this quarter than the previous quarter. So we need to save money. How are we going to save money? Well, the game didn't do well. Gives us a perfect excuse to shut down the studio and save that little bit of money right now. Right now, this quarter, this year. It goes without saying, because we have said it many times, but this is short-sighted, completely absurd. If the goal of your company is to create games and make money, and you recognize that you, whoever was at the top, made a very poor decision, made a company do the wrong game, or bought a company that was doing the wrong game, you're recognizing that now. You say that you're learning your lesson, and yet the result of this is to simply shut down the studio when they are an asset. They are an asset to you. This is always the food. It's always the food analogies. You create a meatball machine. You spend a ton of money, R&D, manufacturing, everything, creating this meatball machine, and you run a bunch of meat through it. You spend a bunch of money on meat, and you realize this recipe for meatballs stinks. It's awful. We fed the machine bad stuff, and now we've got bad stuff. Okay, scrap the machine, get rid of it, tear it apart, literally throw it in the trash. There's no logic in that. Why are you throwing it in the trash? Well, see, here's the thing. We wasted all that money on meat, and the investors, it comes down to the investors. They'll be mad if they don't make enough money right now, this second, so I have to throw away the meat machine. I gotta throw it away. Even though I could just, come up with a better recipe, make new meatballs. Nope. Shut it down. Pull out the guillotine. Can we fit this meatball machine in a guillotine? I don't know, but we're gonna try. And that's what Sony is doing. They are running the proverbial meatball machine through the proverbial guillotine, And this right here is just more proof that Sony as a company has completely and utterly lost their way. They've lost it. I have zero faith in them as a company. Any of the people running the company. I mean, we've heard there have been some shakeups, maybe in upper management. Oh, there's like a new CEO here or something. Maybe we'll see things start looking up. But this right here, the fact that Concord failed, so now you're just shutting down the studio. It's just like, okay, so you don't know what you're doing. You're no different now. Absolutely no different from any of those other big, nasty video game corporations, your EAs, your Activisions, your Ubisofts. Sony's just another one of them now. And that is so disappointing. It's extra disappointing coming from them. Those other companies, I mean, they're pretty much always gross. But like Sony, PlayStation, really? You were already so successful. You just didn't need to be this. You didn't need to. You used to be a source of great fun and innovation, and you had so many of these great IPs, and just in what seems like such a short amount of time, they just threw it all away to become another gross, greedy, soulless corporation. I'm open to them turning things around if that's possible, but like, Sean Layden was right. He saw the writing on the wall. He could see the way things were going, and that's why he left. And that's why we keep seeing him in interviews and everything. He could see the way things were going. And he was right to leave, because I wouldn't want to be associated with this company anymore. They are so consumed by their short-sighted greed that they have reached that point where they're willing to cut off their nose to spite their face. And yeah, I don't know. Maybe they could turn things around if they, remaster, or heck, remake one of the new God of War. Just remake God of War Ragnarok. Maybe just remake that. Maybe remaster that. Maybe that'll get you out of this. Maybe that'll make the investors happy.